What up, barflies across the multiverse? Tis I, hailing from the land of Sake, Shinobi, and Samurai. The boy is Godzilla personified. Ain't no other name but this to go by. It's your boy, Jayhawk. And I'm here with two other of my hosts and friends. I think I'm gonna pass it off to the man, the myth, the legend. You saw him last episode, but here he is again with his actual official debut. Sparks, talk to him. Introduce yourself.
What's good, y'all? I'm Ken Sparks. I'm new to the pod. Just trying to be here and add a little bit of something movie wise. I watch a lot of movies. I see at least one a week, and I love to talk about it. So, just hoping that we can engage in those cinematic conversations.
Awesome.
As of right now, I have no AKAs, so they are soon to come.
Awesome, awesome. And
AKA no AKA.
AKA no AKA. Uh Last but not least, it's come.
Yes. I also am working on my AKA. But for now, I'm Queen Cobb. QC though. I am the Queen Anti-Flex. I am your favorite support character with boundaries. I'm Sony's executive assistant with executive privileges. And I am the video game Ventress. And I'm coming at you live from this place that I've
215
always been.
QC. Uh
Live from the 610. Just kidding. Just kidding.
uh to address the elephant in the room, Big Dan is not with us tonight. He's dealing with some stuff, some health stuff, but he'll be back before you know it. And
Literally before you know it.
yeah. So we're just gonna jump right into it. Today or tonight, whenever you're watching this, we are speaking about the superhero genre. Are we tired of the superhero genre? I thought it would be great to start off with maybe mapping out how long the superhero genre has been a part of the I don't know, the ether, the mythos,
Hmm.
and then even maybe if it's gone through stages. So I know for me starting off, and I mean starting off from like this point and then going back, uh, I would say the MCU, DCEU, those whole universes has been going on for about 15 years now.
Yeah, I would say about so.
15 years.
15
2000,
years,
2008 is when
like a
the
more modern.
MCU. Yeah, a more modern one where everything was kind of like connected
Connected,
before we knew everything was connected.
woven,
Yeah,
Hmm.
tenant.
Well, I think I want to even ask a question like beforehand, like before we
sure.
even make the assumption that like superheroes mean MCU or DCU, right?
Hmm.
Like I think like a good starting question would be like, well, what is a superhero or what is a superhero genre or a superhero film? Because a superhero is really just like a another word for a protagonist that saves the day. So what is a superhero
I
genre?
would
What how
disagree.
do we sort of
I
define
would
it?
disagree only because a superhero, by definition, is usually a super powered being.
I am a superpowered being,
I
right?
mean,
I would disagree with that actually.
Batman withstanding, I feel like
Yep.
there is usually, and that is a whole nother argument for a whole nother day. But
Yeah.
superpowers or superheroes are usually enhanced beings. They have enhanced reflexes and or thought capacity, IQ, whatever it may be, to the point that they are not the average person just caping about. Like I would even say like
Right.
Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are not superhero movies, they're science fiction movies.
Wait a minute.
I don't know about that. I think they definitely are superhero movies
You would call them
for
superheroes?
sure. Absolutely, because
Yeah.
the science fiction lasts about, oh, we got hit by the ooze. That's it. Like that's the end of the science.
And science fiction doesn't mean that it's not a superhero
I
film
never
or
said
superhero
Right.
that.
genre.
I never said that.
But you said it's more like a science fiction.
So
I never
what should this? What's the distinction in your mind?
The distinction in my mind is that
His distinction is it's a monopoly. He's thinking of two particular companies and the monopoly they have over the genre. He's not thinking about what a superhero
that's
is
Mm-hmm.
or
that was
I'm
a
sorry.
very
I'm sorry.
loud
Mm-hmm.
assumption that you made.
Case closed.
My my apologies.
That was a grandstanding assumption that you
She even
made,
started out with the finger. You
right?
started with the
So
finger.
Josh,
You know you're accusing somebody.
is do you distinguish how do you sort of distinguish a superhero from a protagonist or protagonists that have uh supernatural
Sure,
abilities?
this is easy,
Yeah.
and we can use anime. A protagonist is Shinji. A superhero is Sailor Moon.
Sailor Moon
Interesting.
is for sure a superhero. I would agree.
She's also a protagonist.
I never said that they have to
Yeah,
be
but
mutually
Wait, so
those
what
things
exclusive.
aren't
is
in
this?
conflict.
I'm
Like I
so
never
sorry.
said
I'm so
that.
sorry. I'm very that's a very curious answer because what actually is the difference between Shinji and Sailor Moon?
You mean besides
I,
the
to be
superpower
honest
that
with
she
you,
has?
to be
I
honest with
mean,
you,
in a go ahead, go ahead.
I think that it's a character. It's literally his lack of confidence that disqualifies him from being a superhero. Like most superheroes, they don't like they are heading towards the danger. He seems to be like what's the phrase? Get in the robot, right? He always seems to be running away from the situation or super stressed out about the situation.
Okay, so
Even
Shinji?
like superheroes who are kind of like I don't really want to be here, they do always end up running right towards the situation. So
question
I
then.
think it's literally a character thing with him that disqualifies him.
I would disagree, but I would follow
I
that up with
disagree.
another question of Kick Ass. The characters in Kick Ass. Are they superheroes or are they just vigilantes? Because I would call them just vigilantes.
That's a very existential question for a superhero. I mean,
Fair,
does a
if we want
super
to get that
does a
deep
superhero
into it.
and we are not, but I just wonder like because on the question of like Shinji Ikari and Sailor Moon, they really aren't that much different in terms of like I think maybe the idea of a superhero is that it's not just about you, it's about way more people than you, like typically
Right.
like the world or a very large community, and it's now your responsibility whether you like it or not, or whether you took it upon yourself initially or not. It's that a large amount of people that are presumably innocent are now your responsibility.
Right.
So even Shinji Ikari, who's someone who did not necessarily want to be in his situation, may not sort of flex the presentation of a superhero. He still was this he in a way superheroes are kind of like chosen by something, whether it's
Hmm.
their choice or not. And Shinji Ikari, just like Sailor Moon, were people that were chosen by something,
you can be
and
a
how they sort of interpret it. Go ahead.
you can be a hero because you save a bunch of people, but he had a certain skill set that he learned and it was only operating a mech. Sailor Moon
That he
legitimately transforms through powers given to her.
But Sailor Moon is she didn't earn that power. She didn't
I
earn
never
that.
said that Shinji earned his
I'm saying
power and he didn't have powers
no,
to
but
earn. He earned a
So
skill
no,
set.
he in a
now I'm
way he
gonna
does have power because he's a chosen child. Every child
And
couldn't
that
do
makes
it.
him a hero. Great. He is not a
Yes, he's
superhero.
responsible for protect. He is super. He has this thing, this
well, yeah.
ability that not everybody can do. I mean, or this privilege, or this access to something that could save the masses or protect the masses. That does make you a superhero.
Nope.
Right. And now I'm going to contradict myself because if Shinji's not a superhero, then Iron Man's not a superhero because
And
they're
Batman's not a
doing the
superhero.
same
Fair.
thing. They're operating a mech. Oh, so
Fair.
But
you
Batman,
agree with that?
but we can agree.
I don't
But we
agree with
agree
that.
that Batman is a superhero, though.
Right.
But it's not unusual to say that Batman and Iron Man are superheroes. People won't necessarily, unless we get in this deep conversation like we are now.
Hmm.
When people say name a superhero, people would probably say Batman, and people
Right.
would be like, "Yeah,
Top
And
two:
that
Batman,
and that is an
Superman, and three:
argument for
Spider Man.
I think that is an argument for it. That is a perfect argument. Spider-Man versus Batman. Spider-Man could be argued, and I think should be argued, that he is a superhero. Batman, he was a man with a lot of money and a lot of time.
I mean, but I think that it depends on which. I think the thing that makes Batman a superhero, and this is going to be a little bit off, is he ain't right in the head, and because of that, it drives him to do. Like, yes, he has a lot of money, but a lot of people with a lot of money aren't jumping from building to building in the middle
That's
of the night,
fair.
punching people in the face.
That's fair.
Well, you sure about that?
I mean, maybe they operate in secret. I just don't know.
Or they paying somebody to jump building from building and throw packages on random people's steps that's not ours, and then we don't get our package.
That sounds personal. That sounds
Yeah,
billable.
that sounds like a real
Jeff
specific
Bezos can
example.
easily.
To bring us
All right,
back,
sorry. Go.
if you want to define superhero genre, how long have we been in it? I feel like we've been in it for a while. I think the exposure to it has ramped up over the past definitely 15 years, but it could also be argued even longer than that. Um,
Like in film,
in film,
like in
yeah,
media.
I would say mainly in film. I don't think
Yeah,
Hmm.
I think there has been some spillover into TV, but I mean it's
definitely.
been a long time since like Heroes, right? So um
Right. But even before that, because I
mhm,
would say that the superhero genre uh, started with Superman, the movie, right? The very first Superman movie that
In
was the
like the
biggest.
70s
Yeah, in the
or the 60s.
70s,
mhm,
60s. I don't remember which decade it was. So, but I think it started with Superman. But just like a lot of things in genre, it took a while for that next step to be taken because I don't believe there was another superhero movie until Batman '89 after
mhm.
the Superman franchise ran its course. But in
I mean,
between
there's
that,
Incredible Hulk. Like Hulk had a film like what in like the 70s or the 80s.
right? So,
So they
well,
would dabble with certain characters in the comic book universe in film.
what?
Not as often as they do now, but they did that
Mm,
throughout this between the 60s and the 90s.
yeah, what I would say to that is, I think that those were all TV movies. So, like the Incredible
Mhm.
Hulk, there was a Fantastic Four movie, there was a Captain America movie. Stan Lee and his company put out a lot of those characters, but they're all very much TV movies. I think the Hulk, I don't know this for a fact, but the Hulk is really the only one that launched off into like a series. And then there was the Flash series from way back when as well that came out in the 90s. So yeah, so how long have we been in the superhero genre? I think that is fairly like a separate question than how long have superhero movies been around. I think the superhero genre honestly started with I want to say Blade,
Mhm.
but it probably started with Batman '89 because Batman '89 came out, and then there was four other Batmans in the '90s by themselves, or three other Batman movies in the '90s by themselves, and then you jump to uh, X Men in 2000, and I believe Spider Man in 2003, and they weren't connected. So we were in that superhero genre because we were anticipating and looking
Mhm.
forward to those movies. And then Iron Man comes out. I know I'm skipping some movies. There's Daredevil,
Let's
which
not
is
skip Let's not skip those Batmans, right? In the
The
90s.
yeah,
Nolan
We can't
trilogy
like just we cannot skip Michael
yeah,
Keaton.
and
yeah.
that, yeah.
And but they're a big reason why we have the movies we have now. I think all of them were building blocks to where we are now. Yeah.
And I
Definitely.
think that's why I said it like let's talk about the breadth of the superhero genre where it's like I think as you said earlier like there's always been like little droplets along the way but it's become a droplet to like somebody just like turning the faucet on and walking away,
Hmm.
right? Like so
Yeah.
and I but
Yeah.
I think that leads to the question of has it gone stale and or um I think the next question is like how has it changed throughout that time period because like when it was just droplets and being campy, you know, it was like oh like it's a fun little like superhero movie like we'll go it's whatever
Hmm.
and then I would say like kind of like you said the 89 Batman movie I would think Batman in general has always had like a darker tone to it so it's like when it shows up it's a more I don't know anticipated and it holds more weight um for the audience members I don't know
In film, I would say, yeah, for sure. The first two Burton movies definitely had a darker tone to it. When I forget what his name is, I can't believe I'm forgetting his name. But when it came to Batman Forever and Batman and Robin, it was actually emulating
Uh,
the '89, the not the '89,
Clayton George. What's his name?
the '60s. No, not George Clayton. I
Clooney.
George
can't.
Clooney.
Clooney.
Yeah, George Clooney movie, and the previous one with Val Kilmer.
Hmm.
Like they
Yeah.
embraced the more silly side of Batman, which I know this is not a diatribe about Batman, but I would agree that there were droplets. Someone turned on that faucet, and that faucet was the MCU because that was the only time when we were getting back to back to back to back to back movies. But the
So are
difference
you saying
was,
that?
mhm,
Can I ask you a question? Was
yeah,
the catalyst of that full? Because obviously now we're at a point where a superhero film within the context of popular companies such as DC, Marvel, as being like sort of like the top two at least,
hmm,
are like creating a lot of media surrounding some popular superheroes throughout the history.
yeah,
So you're saying that what sort of Marvel film? So you said MCU was sort of like what turned that faucet all the way on.
right, yeah,
Um, was there a particular film? Because my thought is that from what I remember,
hmm,
the transition from the Batman movies that I saw, or even some of the X-Men and Fantastic Four, like from the early 2000s, they felt very like cheesy in a way, almost like the characters were just in cosplay, just acting out. The acting didn't have to be that good.
yeah,
It was just kind of like seeing your favorite character from a cartoon or from a comic book being put in live action. And
yeah.
we already know how good that can get. But I feel like the transition where we really began to see the quality of superhero films, I feel like that really began with The Dark Knight.
Hmm.
When we really saw the transition, or like the sort of like conflation almost of you're wearing the costume but there's also this drama added to it, or like
Yeah.
tragedy and violence that didn't make it feel like cartoony. And I
Right.
know that the DC universe has always been a lot darker than MCU, but from what I remember, it felt like it was the Dark Knight in terms of like the popularity contest on what, or even like the Batman series, really,
Hmm.
in live action, which really like set that forward. But you said you felt like it was sort of like MCU, but where in the MCU did you feel like that faucet was like?
So I think it started with the first movie. The first movie, the post credit scene is Nick Fury coming up to Tony Stark after the movie, of course, the post credit scene.
Was it Iron Man?
Um, yeah, Iron Man, because Nick Fury said, "You think you're the only one?" And then what happened there is that created an expectation that things will be connected. That
Yeah,
expectation never existed before. That never existed before in the uh, fans'
Marvel
expectations
universe.
of no fans' expectations of superhero movies. Because
Hmm.
before that, there was no crossover ever.
Hmm.
Spider Man was in his own universe. X Men were over here. They were, and the reason for that is, uh, they were sold off by Marvel
Hmm.
in the late '90s. Uh, Marvel, because they were going into bankruptcy, Marvel sold off Spider Man and every Spider Man character to Sony,
To Sony.
and they sold X Men and the Fantastic Four to Fox. So there was never going to be any crossover because those companies were never going to work together. Um, so what the MCU did, which is really a miracle in and of itself, is that they took a bunch of lesser known characters and they made them popular. Iron Man was known by comic book fans, but he was not known to the general public.
Hmm.
Same thing with Cap. I think Cap was probably a little bit more known than any of the other ones. Same thing with Thor. Even if you knew their names and you could like recognize them on like a piece of art, every the difference is everybody knows how Batman became Batman. Everybody knows Spider-Man got bit by a radio spider. Same thing with mutants. The general public didn't know any of these people that the MCU was putting forward, except for probably the Hulk because there was a TV show. Any of these people that
So wait,
were put forward. So
So let's
Yeah.
think about where we are now. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there were like the seeds that were planted with Marvel, with DC, and we can sort of think about sort of like the high flyers I mean, we can think of some of the seeds that were planted from years ago, years and
Yeah.
years ago, and we can also think of maybe some of the more modern seeds.
Mm-hmm.
But now we're clearly at a we're in a very very different moment now where Marvel films in a year, there's like at least three. And maybe that
Right.
may be I may be like under, you know, like I don't know
No,
how many Marvel
you're
films
I was
about
because
gonna
we're
say,
right.
I think that's a
almost
pretty good
Yeah.
guess.
we're
Yeah,
yeah,
you're
like
about
how
right.
we're in June right now and how many we're at a point now where MCU is already determining at the beginning of the year how many Marvel films will come out that year.
Right.
That's unheard of. Like that's unheard of in at least film where you can tell me in January almost
Mm.
like it's a budget how many films will be coming out this
Well,
year.
I,
That is wild to me because that shows how much money you actually have to front
Yeah.
and how much money you have in the works and how much media you have in the works. But I've never ever heard of a film series being able to tell you at the beginning of the year, or even the prior year, how many films are projected to come out the next year. So we're
Yeah.
clearly in a very different time than we were 15 years ago with the release of not just Marvel films or superhero films, but even superhero shows,
Right.
superhero
well,
games.
Yeah.
so
You know, like it's
it
different.
is different, and I think going back to like that faucet being turned on, they turned it on and they did it in such a way where it was, I think, and Ken, I'm sure you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like
Mm-hmm.
when somebody like Disney and or Marvel does something like that and they're like, "Oh, we have a phase 1, we have a phase 2." It's like I'm sure that
Right.
was like a very well calculated thing and kind of might have been a Hail Mary of like, we're going to try this thing and if it works, cool, we'll ride this wave. I don't think
Right.
I don't think anybody knew that the wave would become a tsunami, but they were like, we might get a
Mm-hmm.
little, we might get a little something, something from it. But like it grew into such a thing that it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna milk this cow until it falls over. Um, and coming back to the question, is the cow close to falling over?
So that is our question for this podcast. And I think that it's a very, very nuanced question because I don't have a direct answer for you when it comes to that. So here are my thoughts when it comes to what you're kind of alluding to with superhero fatigue. I don't necessarily agree, although I'm conflicted on this,
Hmm?
that there is a such thing as superhero fatigue. And the reason why I feel that way is because there's no such thing as drama fatigue. There's no such thing as horror movie fatigue. There's no such thing as action movie fatigue. What there is a such thing as is bad movie fatigue.
Mm.
If the movies are good, nobody
Bad
cares how
movie
many.
fatigue?
Yeah, if the movies are good, nobody cares how many they are, right? So
Ooh.
that's kind of
I mean, maybe
yeah,
that's a good argument.
yeah. So the
But are they good?
So
Are they good
that
though?
that's completely subjective. I can't answer that question for you.
Yo, Marvel movies at a point, Disney, and I hate to just pick on Disney. I always
Hmm.
preface by saying that, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Sparks, but Disney movies, even if the general population across the board says that John wasn't that good, that John was trash, they're still grossing like 700 mil.
Right,
So
right.
even for like Marvel films, Disney films that we have agreed somehow that are not that good,
Hmm.
it's not quite reflecting that way when it comes to revenue. So when will it'll really be fatigue when we start to see the revenue of these films suffer because if it was truly fatigue, people wouldn't be going to see these movies and these movies wouldn't make as much. But it's almost like the baseline is like 700 mil or like 500
so
mil.
I was
And
I
it's
think
kind of like, how do we actually know that people are
so
fatigued?
this,
From
I.
just discourse?
I was about to say that
Mhm.
speaking of specifically because of the era that we're in, MCU and DCEU, uh
Mhm.
there came a point and I think it was around phase 2 or 3 whenever Black Panther, around the time Black Panther came out,
That's phase
um,
three. Yeah.
phase three, it got to a
Hmm.
point where it was like, eh, it was okay for an MCU film, but what did that mean? MCU had changed the way we looked at superhero movies, at least as a connected universe. Because to Cobb's point, um, the Nolan trilogy was amazing, and I think everybody can agree like that was like really awesome. But then when you had the MCU coming out with a very lighter tone, it was like, oh, like that was like really good. And then you had the Avengers movie, that was like really good. And I feel like they came with a quality to the superhero genre for them that after a certain point you expected at least nothing less than this bar. And so
Right.
even if the movie you got accustomed to having a very good meal. Like, oh snap, this is chicken Alfredo. This chicken Alfredo is really dope. And you just kept getting chicken Alfredo that was like really dope until you got used to the chicken Alfredo that you kept getting. And I was like, I mean, yeah, it was good for this chicken Alfredo. Sure, like it wasn't a bad chicken Alfredo. It wasn't
Hmm.
horrible. Like we've had horrible
And it,
movies
So
before.
let me just say there are so many things I disagree with you on there. One, phase three
it's not
universally,
me, finally.
phase three universally is recognized as the best phase of the MCU. That's when it really hit its stride.
What
It's
year was that?
that was man, I want to say
Or what
20.
what series of films were that in
So
MCU?
I believe that started off with Civil War, and then we had Black Panther, um, Guardians Volume Two. We had Endgame, Infinity War. I believe we had Ant Man 2, because Ant Man, the first Ant Man movie, ended phase two. Phase two, which was not really liked in the beginning because it started off with Iron Man 3 and
Oh,
um,
then it could have been
and
Iron
Thor
Man.
2,
Then it could have been
which
Phase
were
Two.
the worst movies, right? Oh yeah, phase three is also Doctor Strange.
Thor.
So yeah, so you start introducing Doctor Strange, Black Panther, all the central players that would really make an impact going forward. And phase three is when Spider Man came out,
Sure.
Spider Man Homecoming. So
So
phase three, Spider Man, Black Panther, Doctor Strange, Civil War, Endgame,
sure.
Infinity War.
I'm saying
Phase
I
three is yeah,
my argument is less on when it started. My argument is that it there came a point where people got accustomed to a certain level of superhero movies, and then
right.
there was a point where it was like, yeah, it was cool for a Marvel film, like, but it wasn't the
Yeah,
same like uh emotional reaction to something, and maybe that is very subjective.
I think that that happened after Endgame. After
Mm-hmm.
Endgame was when the yeah, it's fine. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So after Endgame, we start with Black Widow. You start with we have Shang Chi, which was phenomenal in my opinion. You have Multiverse of Matt, all the recent, very recent ones. Because you have to remember, we skipped a year because of the pandemic, which I actually think was a good thing for the MCU because they were going to go right into Phase Four right after Spider-Man. What was it? Far From Home, which was the epilogue to the uh, the first phase, or the
Mm-hmm.
no, I'm sorry, the third phase, but the Infinity Saga,
Mm-hmm.
right? So right after that, that's when you had. Why are you doing Black Widow? She's one, she's dead.
Mm-hmm.
Two, this movie takes place directly after Civil War. Like what is like how does this impact the plot? And
Mm-hmm.
the only way it impacted the larger plot was it introduces Yelena, but
Right.
that could have been done in any way,
Right.
any kind of. I actually liked the Black Widow movie, but it was a very much like, why are we
Why do
doing
we
this?
care?
Right.
But the revenue reflects differently, right? Because it just shows that like, and I think like connecting, making this a universe is actually like kind of smart
Hmm.
because it makes fans and viewers that are already invested. And I think that the reason why I'm not so invested into MCU is because I haven't seen many of them and I didn't
Right.
have that pressure, that external pressure to
Yeah.
watch the next one. Oh, I
Yeah.
see this character and now they're about to have their own film. Maybe I should
Hmm.
see that film. Is
Yeah.
like it's this pressure that you have to continue with the universe and you have to sort of
Mm-hmm.
commit because why not? It's all
Yeah.
connected. Who knows what they'll do next? And it's kind of like a almost like a trap. And all these films, even the ones that we say are so bad or are not that great, yeah, they may not make $1 billion like some
Mm-hmm.
of the high flyers do, but they still make a lot of money, which reflects that a lot of people are talking about it and seeing it. So I think it's like the question of like, has it gone stale or
Mm-hmm.
are we tired of it? I'm wondering like, what indication do we have that we're actually exhausted with superhero films? Because I don't see a financial indication that we're tired of or we're at least fed up with superhero like films,
Mm-hmm.
because we see it in many different mediums. Comic books, obviously, the this had some strange impact on the distribution or the creation of comics,
Mm-hmm.
which was at one point the source material,
Yeah.
and in some ways it still is.
Yep.
Video games, television,
Yeah.
like how much would Disney Plus exist? Would Disney Plus be as popular if MCU was not as big as it
Not at
was?
all.
Probably not, right?
Not at all.
So we see like television, movies, who knows what other kind of media, just merchandise,
Mm.
like what
Can I
indication
tell
do
you
we have that people
what
are
I
actually
think it is?
tired? Yeah.
I have two things, right?
I also have two
I
things.
think that there's a difference between the financial success that it's having and whether or not people are continuing to enjoy it. And here's the reason why I say that. I believe that the reason why people are still spending money on it is hope, right? And the reason why I say that is because the MCU has built a track record and a resume to say, man, like Phase 3, bangers like straight through. People have debates about Captain Marvel. I won't get into that because people are toxic. Um, but there was a very um, big incline in the quality. So now it's almost like you're watching. So let's say that it's the same person who follows Boruto, right? And they're like
Follows what? Boruto?
Boruto, and they're like, man,
Mhm.
I love Naruto so much. I want to watch Boruto. And the person
Whoever says that.
like me, I watched it. I was watching it. The person who was like me, who's like, man, I don't like this as much, but I still love seeing Naruto. I still love seeing Hinata. Oh, it's cool to see all the older characters just be around. So in a lot of ways, it's kind of like this hope that things will get better, and it's kind of like you're kind of building off of um, the cachet that you've built before, right? So when we will see the decline, as you're when we see the actual fatigue, is like you mentioned, when the numbers start going down. I have one last thing to add to that.
Well, just
It,
quickly, I'm
mm,
not saying that that
yeah.
financials are necessarily the line for
Hmm.
determining if people are tired of it. I think that
Yeah.
it's just a very easy one because it's subjective and can be seen. But
Sure.
what it sounds like, and what I've said before, is that this relationship and this hope that we have for MCU and all these other, it sounds like an abusive relationship, because I can't really think of many forms of media where people continue to watch it or engage with it with the hope that it'll be better. It's so easy to check out of the things that we once enjoyed, but I feel
Hmm.
like MCU is a big one where it's like, I'm gonna watch it because why not?
Right.
It might not be that good, or I don't think it's gonna be that good, but I'm gonna watch it anyway. It really
Yeah.
just shows how pervasive like Disney and Marvel are, to a point where people are watching it not even for enjoyment. Right? It's not even, it doesn't even sound like it's for enjoyment.
I
If
don't
you're watching
agree
something
with
out of
that.
hope that it'll be
Yeah.
the way that it once was, that is
Hmm.
a waste of your time, right? That sounds wasteful. That sounds abusive. That sounds
You never
manipulative
watched a movie
on
that
Disney's
you just
part.
like put on in the background though?
Is that what you're saying that these films are? Like Marvel has become
I,
that for y'all?
I don't agree with that.
That's why Marvel films, some of the worst Marvel films make $500 million because background?
Wait,
I don't
That's
you
I don't
also
agree with
said
that.
that
So
money
mhm.
is not the end all be all
I
of
didn't it
why.
doesn't have to be the defining. It
Sure.
Yeah.
doesn't have to be the defining reason, but
Hmm.
I'm saying that it sounds like people are if it's this idea that a lot of people are still investing into these films because of the hope that it will continue to be good, or it may be the way that it was when it was the best,
Hmm.
that sounds, when it comes to media, it sounds a bit
So here's why I disagree
rare.
with you. Here's why I disagree
Go
with you.
ahead.
The thing that a lot of people, and I'm not talking about you, Cobb, the thing that a lot of people forget about the media that they consume is that it is a choice. You do not have to continue if you don't want to.
But you
Unfortunately,
make
people.
it sound like it's not. You make it sound like it's not a
Who makes
choice.
it sound like it's not
How
a
so?
choice?
Sparks,
How
you're
so?
saying that people are watching it with this idea of hope. That
Right.
doesn't sound, that sounds like you're hanging on to something.
But you have the choice
It
to
doesn't
No,
let
sound,
go.
but that is
but
that hope that
you're
you have is
based
on
versus
you.
evidence that it's not, versus like, it's like, yo, I'm continuing to like to engage with this media because I hope that it will get better. That sounds like some strange like trap. Meaning you're willing to watch something that is bad, even after you watch something bad, you're willing to continue on with the hope that the next one will be
Do you
better. That sounds like an abusive
sure?
relationship
And
Here's the
even in
where
an
thing.
I'm gonna,
abusive
that
relationship,
is,
and this is not like the
Mhm.
I
go ahead, get us canceled.
right.
Go ahead and get us
Here's the
canceled.
thing. Here's the thing, and
Yeah.
I think Sparks has a good point where it's like you can always choose to be like, you know what? I think I am done with this, and I'm walking away from it.
Mhm.
That is the same choice that you'd be like, you know what? I'll watch it again. Fine, it don't matter.
I'm not trying to hear that.
It's only X amount of
I'm not trying
dollars.
to.
It's the
The
same choice
I'm
that
worst
you
not
can
trying to hear
people,
have
that.
to be like,
Marvel.
I won't watch it.
the the worst
Marvel
people
has gotten
on
to
the.
a point where you people cannot opt out. You and Dan have said it,
I
that it's at a
disagree.
point where you're so far in, it's almost it's painful to even
And
say I didn't
you
see
can't
that. It's almost
say
like
me and
you
Dan
have,
because we are in a very different demographic than other
Yeah.
folks. Just being on this
I
podcast.
and
look the worst films. Everybody hates Black Widow, but Black Widow made 400 mil.
well, I
And people
disagree with
probably
that.
knew that Black Widow wouldn't be that. People probably agreed that like you said, Black Widow, why do we need this?
Right.
Why do we want this? Yet typical dramas and comedies and horrors wish to make 400 mil. Yet this film that you were already questioning while it was being advertised still made so much money. And again, that doesn't necessarily reflect the quality of it, but that
Hmm.
reflects that people are still willing to see and spend money on something that they were already questioning why this
Well,
should even exist. And they even vote as something that wasn't that great. People, Black Widow is not rated very well by the fans, yet it has made such a substantial amount that how do we show Disney or Marvel that it's like we don't bang with this? I don't know.
here's the thing.
I'm not sure. Go ahead.
I believe a lot of the stuff that you said is very subjective.
Of
Like
course.
I no, yeah, of course. Um, I don't think Black Widow is a bad movie. I just don't think it was necessary. There are so many movies that are not necessary that
It
I
wasn't
really
bad, but it
enjoy.
wasn't necessary.
Yeah, I will be seeing the Fast and the Furious 10. Is it
Of
necessary?
course, Fast and the Furious and
Absolutely not.
MCU are the same thing. They are the same
Yeah,
thing. They get
there's
you
genre
locked into
films
this
that have.
world. It's like world building where you're in
Hmm.
the world already. You must continue because I'm already in.
I
I'm already in. I
Right,
already know these characters.
right.
disagree. Only
But
because
Many people don't opt out of Fast and Furious. A
I've
lot of
opted
people
out.
continue to watch Fast and Furious because why not?
so let me ask you this, Kyle.
I don't like questions.
Anytime that someone has once enjoyed something, but then enjoys it a little less as that goes on, but continues to participate, that is A, the company's fault that's putting it out, and B, it's abusive for them to continue putting out, even though individuals are saying they don't like it, or, I mean, which is subjective, like I said. I can't do, like, if I'm a company, right? And I'm not trying to take up for companies, but if I'm selling something and people are buying it, I'm not going to stop selling it. Plain and simple.
Exactly,
Yeah,
because capitalism, right?
yeah, but also
Kingdom
because
Hearts is a perfect example. Kingdom
also
Hearts is playing off of our nostalgia
Mm-hmm.
and what it has done for us as children. They continue to play upon that and continue to release games that are subpar, and they continue to rope us in because of the emotional and psychological ties that we have to Kingdom Hearts
So
1.
wait, are you
That is
tired
the
of
only
Kingdom
reason
Hearts?
why I'm tired of Kingdom Hearts being bad, yet I'm still gonna buy Kingdom Hearts
Aha!
4. That's my
Aha! But
point.
but
About
that's
That's
my
that's
point.
my point.
There's no
It's not.
superhero fatigue.
It's
There's
almost like
bad
it's
movie
not non.
fatigue.
It's almost like it's non-consensual. You're
but the
playing
question is, are
upon
we tired of
something.
it,
No,
right?
no, 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 no. No. So
Are we?
here,
If we're
here,
continuing to, if we're continuing to engage and invest,
here's what
what?
we.
How are we
Because
saying? How are we
here's
showing
another
that we're
thing, and this is
tired?
what I wanted to say a few minutes ago. Another thing is it also comes down to like it's not we're talking about the MCU and DCEU, but there are other
Mm-hmm.
superhero things out there. Like Invincible is
Sure,
a thing, right? The
sure.
M
Invincible's
Night
phenomenal.
Shyamalan
The boys,
Glass
M Night
what was it?
Shyamalan.
Glass
Glass
Unbreakable
really
Split.
great.
Yeah,
Like those are
Split is
yeah.
great.
right, Split was amazing. But like these are things that
Split
Glass
was
was
exist
amazing.
disappointing.
out in the universe as it is.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
I don't think I agree that I don't think that we are fatigued with superheroes per se, because when a good story comes along, a good story is picked up and a good story is watched.
Right.
Now, the fact that we're harping and zoning in and zeroing in on the MCU, I think
It's not
that's a
fair.
different conversation altogether.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And to continue off of that, I don't know if we're dating these podcasts or what have you, but Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 comes out in 2 days. If it is great, then this whole fatigue thing goes away. If it's bad, then the narrative continues. It's very
That's
temperamental.
that is an abusive relationship. It's called the hunt. It is an abusive relationship. You do something terrible. You do something absolutely awful. You
Mm-hmm.
destroy. You kind of you impact the relationship. Then you do something great, and the person is back in.
Sure. So,
Right?
so what are you
It
saying?
sounds abusive.
Is that all you're saying?
My point is that like no, I'm
So
just saying no. Yes, that's what I'm saying is that the relationship between MCU and the fans is very special because they have y'all since what 08, whatever, whenever Iron Man came out, even
mm-hmm.
before even it even predates Iron Man, even for people that were excited about the television shows, other random movies, the characters that they've seen before, like it's such a deep and pervasive relationship that it almost feels like people are locked in and they feel like they're missing something if they don't see the next one. That doesn't sound, yes, you have a choice to not do it, but it kind of sounds like you're kind of like under some like imperious spell or something.
I don't think that we are highlighting enough how much of a choice it really is. It's the same thing as people who say, "Now I got to get all these streaming services because blah, 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 blah." It's just like cables. Like the difference is you can cancel this anytime and you can choose what you want to do. The illusion that you have no choice is an illusion. You have a choice. I do
This is getting a
not.
bit existential.
Yeah, yeah. I do not subscribe to the idea that grown adult males and females and theys and thems and everyone in between don't have a choice of what they. So, for example, I saw all three Hunger Games movies. I said all three because there's a fourth. I didn't care, so I stopped watching it.
Mm-hmm.
I,
Sure, fine.
Maze Runner came out. I watched the first two. I didn't watch anything after that because I don't care. Right? So
We
my
have to think about the fandom, yo. The fandom when
yeah.
someone you can there's a difference between like watching a film for enjoyment, like hey, like I'm watching Hunger Games because people said that that was a good film. So I'm
Hmm.
going to watch the first one. Oh, I like the first one. I'm gonna watch the
Yeah.
second one. Okay, the second one was good too. I watched the third one. Oh wait, yeah, I wasn't really banging with that. The fourth one comes out, not really interested. But when
Right.
you're already kind of invested into the it's like a different level of investment. I feel like when you get to this point where you
But I was
feel like you
invested though.
need to watch
I
it.
think
I
So
was
you just
invested.
opted out? You
Yeah,
just
I just
opted out of the
opted out. I
fourth
just
one
didn't.
because
I didn't
why?
care. I stopped caring.
Why? How do you what caused you to stop caring?
because
It
what
just wasn't my
yeah,
flavor. I did not care about it
You're
anymore.
invested and just randomly you just stop
well,
caring?
here's another thing.
Yeah.
Is that
So
what
here's another
investment
thing.
means?
I read all three Hunger Games books, and I then saw the
Mhm.
movies, And so when I saw that there was a fourth book coming out, I actually remember reading the third book and being like, she's I feel like it's fallen off. And so when I saw that the fourth book was coming, I was like, I don't think I need to do it. I've read my story.
Right.
Kind of like the same thing with Naruto. I've I've gone through the filler eps. I've put in my time with Naruto. I personally do not need to see Boruto, even though the fights that they show on Facebook and whatnot look amazing.
They're
Phenomenal.
I
animated. They
Yeah.
do
they
look quite
look great, but
amazing.
I'm just like,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's worth me sloshing through another 100 and some odd episodes, and I don't know if it's
Yeah.
worth me sloshing through another 120 minutes of a prequel of a series that I already finished and put the time in. Like, I'm fine
Yeah.
with that. I think un- I
I'm
think the
happy.
biggest thing is
But
you talk about the fandom and the fandom size of the Hunger Games versus the fandom size of Marvel
very,
superheroes
very
is
different.
like
Huge
huge
difference.
difference. So off of that
And
alone, you're going to make numbers because now the fandom actually has money to put behind it as well. So it's
Yeah.
like it's a very different scale that we're talking about. So like
Hmm.
yeah,
but
they only
typically
make
fandoms
400
operate at
million dollars. No,
that's not a
nobody's gonna
it's at a point
quit
where
the
that's not
thing.
even a
Like the drop off has to be so significant that I don't know if it's questionable if it will ever get to that point just
it won't.
because of the number of people and to Sparks point, you might get a dud every now and again, but like when you hit
Right.
What dud?
but
Name
when you
what is considered the dud?
Thor
Let me ask you,
3,
what is considered
was it
like
Thor
the
3 or Thor
Thor
2?
3?
Thor: Love and
Thor
Thunder
2?
was terrible. Oh, Thor 2 was considered a dud.
Thor 2 with regards
Iron
to
Man
what?
3 was considered a dud.
Right.
However, depending on who you ask.
Thor 2?
Yeah.
Thor the Dark World, and
Yeah.
maybe again, I'm being honest with you that like I know for sure, and I'll preface by saying that box office and revenue does not necessarily make a film good or
Never.
bad, right? Because
Yeah.
we've seen films
Transformers
that
movies
have
are
hit
making
the
$1 billion,
negatives.
and I do not understand
Sure,
why.
but I'm saying, but the idea is that the very least that like revenue can show
Hmm.
is that people are going to see it, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's good, doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that people are invested enough or
Hmm.
interested enough to be able to spend money on it,
Right.
right? So if we look at a film like Thor: The Dark World, which cost about $200 million to make and made $650 million,
Hmm.
and then what came after Thor? What came after The Dark World?
I don't know if I don't
What
know if
what
Iron
came
Man
after
3.
Thor?
No, Iron Man 3 was the first thing
What was the
after
next Thor?
Avengers.
What was the next Thor? Was there a
Oh,
Thor movie after The
the
Dark
next Thor
World?
movie was
Was it Love
Ragnarok, which is
Yeah.
universally loved.
Right. So it's like even after a film that is considered a dud that
Hmm.
made 650 million dollars, the next one comes out, which typically speaking, if there is a film that comes out that is absolutely trash, there's gonna be a lot of like skepticism
Yeah.
about the next one,
But
right?
we're
Yeah.
Obviously marketing, but then we have a film that spent as much to make it and made $855 million. So
Hmm.
it's really like confusing to me because it's like if Kingdom Hearts 3 is bad, and I'm
Right.
using Kingdom Hearts as an example, I'm just picking on Kingdom Hearts.
Hmm.
Kingdom Hearts 3 was terrible, unfortunately. And then Kingdom Hearts 4, their previous Kingdom Hearts 4, I'm gonna be a bit nervous, right? I'm gonna
Yeah.
wonder, wait, should I invest in this? Just like y'all were saying about the Hunger Games. I feel like it's fallen off. I'm not gonna invest in this next one
Hmm.
based off of what I read about the present one.
Yeah.
That is typical, right? Yet we have, and obviously marketing plays a part, right? Things like that. But if
Hmm.
we have a film that is considered a dud being followed up by a film that I'm looking at made $855 million, what's
Hmm.
it's much
happening?
more than marketing. It's also
Yeah.
Sure.
the what is it? The fact that there are so many other things, like the fact that not for nothing, this podcast exists, or like you think of like new rock stars, like people are making livelihoods off of this. That's one.
Hmm.
Two, the level of scrutiny that goes into each movie of like, oh, who's directing it? Oh, Taika Waititi is directing it. Oh, okay. Like I like his work. Let me like look into it.
Right.
Like there are levels to it, and there are different things that will draw somebody back to maybe they were like on that precipice of being
Hmm.
like, you know what, I don't know, and then they're like, oh snap, but like Taika though, so like let
Let me
me.
also say, in particular with the MCU, you'll see something that you rarely see elsewhere unless you're talking about something like Kingdom Hearts. The movie might be bad. I love Thor, the character. The character.
Mm,
Him, I want to see him in things and I want to see him be awesome. If the movie is bad around him, eh. When he's in Avengers, oh, Thor's here. Like there's a it's very interesting for the MCU specifically. They can be in bad individual movies, but also be good characters. I've seen a lot. So I guess we probably shouldn't get into Star Wars, but my whole
No,
thing,
we cannot.
I,
Star
I,
Wars is very
yeah,
unique.
yeah. Well, here, let me
Where's
just say,
Dan?
let me just say one specific thing about the sequel series. For me, all the
Like the
characters,
the one the newer
seven,
sequel
eight,
ones
nine.
yeah,
from the
seven, eight,
original
and nine,
6
yeah,
outside of the like 7. Wait,
yes,
7, 8, 9, the one
yeah,
from the early
No, 7, 8, 9, like
no, no,
late
Ray
no,
90s.
Ray Skywalker,
Oh, the
and
new ones like
yes.
oh
yeah,
wait.
yeah, yeah, yeah. That's 7, 8, and 9. Um, for me personally, all the characters are dope. The story surrounding them and how they used it, not good.
Mm.
So there's a, but do I want to see when the Ray movie was announced? I was like, oh my god, why are they doing a Ray movie? It has nothing to do with Ray. It has everything to do with my confidence in them being able to make a good movie around Ray and not do weird things with her. So the character, the actress, the costume design, everything about Ray, I'm all for. It's the story that's the problem, and the same thing you'll find in comic books themselves. There are a lot of characters that are great with a lot of bad stories.
Mm.
Not every
But it feels
Batman
like
story is good, but you'll come
but it
back
feels
because
like
I love
almost
Batman.
right. It's
Yeah.
exploitative, right? It is inherently exploitative where it's like I love my mom, so I will continue because I love my mom, I will continue to deal with my mom's nonsense because fundamentally I love my mom.
Wait,
No,
but are
Right?
not
there
It's kind of
more?
like this
not
thing.
exactly.
It you just said it. You just said it. You just said that it's like, yo, the characters are dope and I love Ray, but the story isn't that great. So you continue to invest in the story hoping that it'll get better because you love
No, but
Ray.
hold on,
So
hold on,
it's
hold
like
on.
it's
So
exploitative
to keep
and a lot of series do it is because I can make the story trash, but I know you love Iron
Here's the
Man. I
thing.
know you want to see Tony
Here's
Stark.
my
But
one question,
that's
and this is a question for
hmm
Spark.
It's
This is a
exploitative.
question for Sparks, and maybe QC, maybe you know the
hmm
ratio of duds to hits, especially if we're
Sure.
talking about the MCU, because
the
that's where this
MCU.
conversation has
Yeah.
gone. Um,
hmm
what do you think the ratio of duds to hits is? Because I think that's another reason as to why you're
Sure.
still seeing this recurring revenue.
I'm
I'm
sure
gonna
there's
go
not
to
a
my
lot of dud. You
letterbox.
can't even compare it.
Yeah, I'm gonna go to
So
my
it's like
letterbox real quick
we talk about
because
like
I
you're
have all of them ranked.
you talk about all
I'm
these,
sure most
but that's the thing, like you're talking about like this being like an abusive relationship, or is it just a relationship where like, hey, he forgot to, I don't know, do X, Y, and Z that one time. All right.
I'm
Here's
gonna
my
deal with that, but next
here,
time he'll do better.
here's my my
I
question to you,
gotcha.
Cop. Um, let's say that your favorite musical artist, right? They're putting out good albums. They put out a bad album. From what you're telling me, it would be abusive for him to put out another album.
Well, it'd be abusive for
Him
you
or
to put
her.
out
Okay.
to expect you to
It would
buy
be
it.
like, oh, you because
Listen.
you love my old stuff, like and because you didn't like this, despite that.
Listen.
If I put out
So
Or there
something,
might just be some bad
yeah,
songs
that's a
on
good
that
point.
one album.
right.
That's a good point. No, I love that point because it kind of like counters it kind of like it does kind of like make me confront something that I said in the sense
hmm
that it's like, hey, if my favorite band came out with an album that I didn't think was that good, and then they had another album coming out after, I would probably tune
Hmm.
into that album because
Right.
right out of hope, right out of
Right.
hope that it's like, all right, maybe this album just wasn't for me, or maybe it
Yeah.
wasn't just maybe I'm just not feeling this particular sound that they went,
Hmm.
right? Um, but how long will I deal with these inconsistencies before I say, yo, I don't know what they're doing?
Now here's
Right?
the
I think
thing.
that it's a question of I think it's
Mm,
a question of like length, right?
mm,
Giving how many MC Universe films have came out in the last, like, how many has it been so far since, like, what, Iron Man, like, what, 30,
I want to say 30,
3,
30, 31.
31. I'm
Right.
sure that y'all will say, as fans that are already indoctrinated, that more of them were good than they were bad. Sure.
Yeah, if that's my
But
opinion.
if the question coming up is about um uh exhaustion,
Hmm.
then that what is it that like prompts the question of, are we fatigued by superhero films? Because the only reason why the question of superhero fatigue, the question of superhero fatigue would only come up if you are beginning to feel fatigued. So if there's more good films than there are bad films, where's the fatigue coming from? Is there actually fatigue with y'all as
So,
people that watch
mhm,
I
these
think this goes
films?
back to our statement of like the faucet being turned on, where it's like
right.
we not only are there more superhero films being made, they're dropping at a rate that they have not dropped at before.
What do you mean dropping? Like there's too many?
Releasing, yeah.
They're
But
releasing.
if they're good, like Spark said earlier, if they're
If they're
good,
good, nobody
then
cares.
that's not a
But hold on,
problem.
Yeah.
going back to your favorite album or your favorite artist, if your artist went from dropping one every 4 years to one every other month, and like
If
Hmm.
they're
and the
good,
first two are good, the third one is bad, the fourth one is fire. What are you doing with that fifth one? Are you going to come in? Are you gonna buy it?
Exactly.
probably.
So the thing that I think Josh is alluding to is that I lost my train of thought. There it is. It's going and it's coming back. The thing that Josh is alluding to is that I don't believe it's abusive to for an artist to continue to try to put out things even though their audience didn't like the last thing that they put out. I think
Strong
abusive
language.
Sure.
is I you know what I think is abusive in terms of film is when it's universally panned and they keep putting it out. As of right now, nothing in Marvel is universally panned. I
Mm.
can't say nothing. Very few things are universally panned. And what I think the issue is,
I mean, that would be depending on how Marvel determines what is successful and what's not,
no, I mean
and which is
like
probably money.
I don't mean money. I mean
But maybe that's how
what
they
I
determine success.
yeah for them, but for
There's been no box office flops for Marvel. So my question for them would be like, how do they determine if something is bad? If it
word of
doesn't
mouth,
make
word of
no,
mouth. Yeah,
no way. Because if I make a film that is considered absolutely terrible and I spent $50 million to make it, but it makes 600 million, it doesn't matter what people have to say about it.
that
In
is
in a business sense,
in a business sense, sure, but
but that's how they
what you
think
do,
because they're
what you do in that case is that it's not that you stop putting them out; it's that you make them better. Yeah, people didn't like this movie. It did make a lot of money, but in order for me to continue to have people spend money, it has to be good.
But how do
The
you know? How do they know how to make it better if they've
Because we
already
complain
been
about
showing that?
it.
Yeah,
If
because
we
you
complain
complain
about
about it.
it, then they're
But
like,
I don't.
let's not
I
do
don't feel
that
like
because
that's.
when we did that,
What
I don't feel
Marvel?
like that's how capitalism. I don't know if that's how capitalism and making money
so
works.
so
I feel
so
like it's seen in
hear me
cash,
out.
not in like, oh, I
Hear me
think.
out.
Go ahead.
I make a bad movie. It only makes $600 million.
Only.
But we're talking scale here, right?
We're talking
I'm
about
Disney.
relative to the
That's
I'm
movie.
that's
Disney.
good for
We're
Marvel. 600
scaling.
mil
We're
is good for.
scaling. So
That's pretty good for Disney. 600 mil is
I
good for
made
Disney.
400 million.
300 mil.
300
All right,
mil.
maybe
I
that's like
made 300
mediocre.
mil on this movie that it took me 150 to make. Okay, darn, not a great look. Could have done
No,
better. All right, I look at the web because the web is eternal, and I'm hearing and
Is Disney
seeing.
looking at the web?
I'm huh,
Yes,
Is
absolutely,
Disney looking at the web?
bro?
absolutely.
Why are you trying to be like this? You know, social media is a thing. You know, the social networks are a thing. That's where people are talking. They're talking on YouTube. They're talking on Facebook. It's word of mouth at the water cooler. You hear it from
Hmm.
your wife's sister's best friend's uncle's child that they did not
I said
like a
Disney.
certain thing. So
Hmm.
I said Disney, not you and I.
that beyond, I make a bad movie. I hear how.
If Disney was listening to the web, maybe they wouldn't have released these films that y'all are now saying. Why did
Are
we
you
need
done or
it?
are you finished? Because I was like
Right?
in the middle of something.
I'm sorry. I
so,
apologize. Go ahead.
so I make a bad film. I hear about it on the interwebs, and it's like, damn, I only made 300 mil. Maybe if I fix this, I can make 600 mil, and then I make that hit,
Hmm.
and I get not 600 mil. I probably get 800 mil because you know what? I made it
Is that how
ethnocentric. So I added a black character and made
eh,
them the central part of the
is that
role.
how it works? Is that how that works in all cases?
And
Is that how that works with Disney?
are you saying that that does not work?
I mean,
Are
logically
you
speaking,
saying that
that
does
would
not
work.
work? Is
Yeah.
that what you're saying on the recorded line?
That like if I make a certain amount of money and people say, "Hey, I didn't really like this. So my next attempt is to make it better."
Hmm.
Are you saying that like Disney or like Marvel Universe or rather like any media company is about fan service? Are they all about fan service?
To a certain degree.
Yeah, because
Hashtag
they're
Sonic.
serving the fans. Every
Excuse
single
me?
film that you put out is serving the fans. Because if you're not serving the fans, you're not making any money. If you're
Hashtag
giving people
Sonic.
stuff that they don't want,
Sonic like Sonic
Sonic is
the
a
Hedgehog?
great example because when they originally put out the art for Sonic, everybody was like, "Why the hell does he look like
Oh
this?"
yeah, people were sure.
Right,
Not
and
that's
then
an
they went back and
example.
changed it, and then they made a
That's
lot of money.
that's an example. First of all, we can't do this parallel universe
And Sonic
crap. All
Two is
right,
great, and
I get you, but we can't do this
That's
parallel
you
universe crap. What
asked
I'm
me. You
saying,
the
asked me
what I'm
spinoff
saying,
earlier. I
Knuckles is
gave you an
coming out.
example. We got a Knuckles spinoff coming off. I don't know what more you want.
Right,
The MCU is still
a Knuckles
because
eternal.
spinoff that
you
I am
cannot
excited
prove
about.
you cannot prove that that is happening simply because Sonic changed the animation. The whoever it is that released Sonic changed
And you can't
because
prove
fans
that
were
it would
complaining.
not have happened if they had not changed it.
You're making the argument that it happened because they changed it. I'm not the one making the
I can tell
argument, so I
you
don't have
right
to prove
now
it.
that I
You
am
can't
making that
prove that.
argument. I'm telling you right now,
Listen,
I am making that argument. And the reason
all
why
I'm
is
saying is
because
that
I wouldn't have bought a
fans
ticket if he continued to look like that.
fan service is not as common. Fan service happens where it's like the fans say, "I want this, I want this, I want this," and the company's like, "All right, let's do this because the fans are saying it." But it's not as common as we like to believe it
I'm not
is.
saying it's as common, but I'm saying that if you don't think that they don't think about it even a little bit
Mm.
to make that extra point, it's point 0.5, but like
I think about a
500,000.
lot of things. I think about a lot of things that I don't do.
Cobb, can you do me a favor? Can you
Are you gonna tell me
define?
to shut up?
No, absolutely not. Can you define fan service for me? Because I think I may have taken it differently than what you may have intended.
Well, in the context that I'm speaking about, this idea that if a very very large amount of people seemed on at least in certain mediums like the internet
Right.
say or newspapers say like, "Hey, this movie was terrible. They should have done this.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't some such and such do this? Why couldn't they have such and such play this character?"
Mm-hmm.
And the idea is that these companies are listening and the next time around they do what the masses are suggesting or what they wish that would happen. That is what the creators of the next film are taking into consideration. And I'm not saying that that doesn't happen, right? I'm just
Mm-hmm.
saying that I don't think it happens as much as we think it does.
Well, with that definition that you just gave, I completely agree with you. When you say fan service, I was thinking of
This is what the people
Captain
want.
America
Do you do
picking
it?
up Thor's hammer. Like that's fan service because it's something that's recognizable from the comics, and that's something that a lot of comics fans, oh my god! Look. But what you're talking about, I
The
100% agree
people
with you,
complain. If the
and
people
there's a
complain
reason for
enough,
that.
then we do what they say. It
Yeah,
happens in some cases. It
it happens
happens, but it
sometimes.
doesn't. I don't think it happens as much in film
I
as
agree
it
with you.
does in other mediums.
I don't agree with that. Because here's the reason. Here's the reason I agree with you in terms of film.
Yeah, that's what I
Fans,
said. I don't think
yeah,
I don't think it happens as much in media as it
hmm
does in other mediums. Like I think in other mediums, they're listening to what the fans say. If they complain enough, we'll do it or
hmm
we'll consider it. But I think in film, it doesn't happen as much where they listen exactly to what the masses are
hmm
saying.
How many
Well, I
of those
think that
Especially
people?
if you're already in. If you're already in, I don't have to appease you because you in. You're already invested, Josh.
that is
Jayhawk, you're
incorrect.
already
You're
invested. I
so
already know
funny.
that you love Iron Man. So if I make Iron Man put on a cheerleading outfit, then it's like even though you'll hate it and you'll complain about it, at least I know that Jayhawk will buy a ticket. So I mean, I don't. Why do I have to change much if I already know you're invested?
I don't agree with that.
I know.
Yeah,
It doesn't
and the
make
reason
sense.
why and the reason why I don't agree with that is
I hope
because
we cut. I hope we
I
cut
I,
this
Nah.
out.
I told you guys. No, no, you're good. Um, because I
No,
think I
I'm a
told you guys
pussy.
earlier today. I've seen pretty much every superhero movie that's come out since Blade,
Damn.
like in the theater,
Damn.
right? Except for one, and that was Fan Four Stick with Michael B. Jordan.
How do you define
And
superhero
my
film?
hmm?
We already did that. That was the beginning of this
I'm sorry.
episode.
Did you see
uh,
Titanic?
yeah. So, and the reason I didn't see it is because it looked god awful, and it looked terrible, and I just did not want to see it, right? But I will tell you this: a lot of times I go to see movies that I think are going to be bad, and they're good. A lot of times I go to see movies I think are going to be good, and they're not. Like I think the thing that we are taking away from or not considering in this conversation is that yes, movie companies are companies that are trying to make money. Same thing with a lot of other media companies. There are artists working there. There are people who are actually earnestly trying to put out good art. It's still art, even if some of it you don't like and some of it you do like. So in thinking about it as art, I don't think that I'm ever going to tell an artist an artist to stop doing that. Like if you want to try again, go ahead and try again. I may not like it.
Sure.
I may choose not to engage in it, but I'm also not going to tell you, hey, don't do that. You know how many movies?
Sure.
This is not a rant on you. You know how many movies I've seen where they're like, man, why is this? Like, did we even need this? Like, why do we need to? Or who asked for this? Right?
But it ends up being fine.
It ends up being great or fine
Sure.
or you know what I mean. So if, as you mentioned, if companies always listen to fans, nothing would get made.
Nothing. Exactly. That's
Yeah.
my point. Is that fan service doesn't actually work in the long run. If you continue to do a fan, which is why a lot of companies do not do what fans say because it doesn't actually mean much. And that is especially true in like gaming, where it
hmm
seems like gaming companies completely be ignoring what like the fans
Right.
say because the idea is like everybody is always going to find something to complain about.
hmm I,
So we're just going to
yeah.
do what's in our vision, whether it's good or bad. But the idea is that if we listen too much into what I think that in some ways fans should be
hmm
listened to,
And that's what I mean by
especially when
art.
it comes. Sure, and I
Yeah.
think of it in gaming, like in gaming when fans are saying, "Yo, this mechanic doesn't work, and this is why because we're the ones experiencing this thing that you
hmm
released." Then yes, it
Yeah.
makes sense to consider that because you can change it right in real
Right.
time. Movies are different unless you had like a point and you want like there are a lot of movies that people complain about that it's like yo like I had a vision for what this would look like, this is
hmm
what it is, and if your interpretation or if your feelings of it are different then that's fine, this is what
Right.
the vision was.
Right.
But with things like the MCU or these huge universes and series is this idea of like you have to keep on creating, and how do you not fall into the conversation of what fans hated or what they loved?
hmm
It's probably very difficult to ignore what the people that are spending the money have to say about how this film was, because if your idea is to continue to make money then you kind of have to be mindful, Josh, to what the people are saying to an extent if you want to continue to make it. But I just think if I'm already locked in,
hmm
it makes it for the average fan, it makes it very difficult to back out.
I think that
emotionally at least.
the mhm.
Average, if I love me some Iron Man, it's going to be very hard for me to not watch that next Iron Man film with the hope that it'll be better than the last one
But why is that bad?
because I
That's what
love
I'm
Iron
trying to
Man.
understand.
I don't think that that's bad on the
Mm.
fan. I
What
love
do you?
Iron Man, and you were
Yeah,
exploiting my love for Iron
Oh, you
Man,
think that is
right?
bad
I
on the
think
fan?
exploiting.
no,
So
I
the
never. My whole point was that a lot of it is non-consensual. My point is, I was putting it on the companies, saying these companies are exploiting the people's love and interest in the character, which is why I was talking, which y'all was talking about, like choice and like everybody has a choice. Yes, we do have choices to make. We can decide to watch the movie or not. But if I love me some Iron Man and you know that I love me some Iron Man, you have a one up
I
on
think
me. You have
I think
something
that is a
over
very
me.
different question than am
yeah.
I tired of Iron Man or tired of bad Iron Man films.
I am tired of Kingdom Hearts. But when Kingdom Hearts 4 comes out, I will buy it with the
But
hope that it will be
but
better
then
than
those
Kingdom
are
Hearts
two
3.
different questions, right?
Sure.
The question was,
Yeah.
are we is there a superhero fatigue? It zeroed in on MCU, but like the question was, is there a superhero fatigue? And to be
Probably is.
tired and to still buy the ticket, that might be where it splits.
They
Yeah.
they don't have to
So
be mutually exclusive.
Which is
They don't have to
fine,
be
but
mutual to
I
be tired.
think you've been going hard in the paint for a very different question this whole time. That's what I'm saying.
yeah.
I'm saying like, hey, I'm saying that it can be it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. I can be tired and still buy the ticket.
So so
I can be
Hmm.
tired and still
so
buy the
that's right.
ticket.
You know what? That's a great place to end this episode. only
I'm tired of
only
it,
Yeah.
because
but
I
I'ma still invest because I'm
but no,
in.
I think that's I do oh snap. Uh-oh. Alarms. I do think that that is a great
I don't know.
I do think that's a
I'm
great
tired of you, but I'ma still deal with
fair.
you because I've been dealing with you for this
Hey,
long and you've been good most
you
of the
know what?
time.
An hour isn't a long time. But I do think if we have final thoughts, I would love to hear them. But I think that is a
Hmm.
great place of this question of is there superhero fatigue? And I think there's a difference. We finally reached it. That there is a difference between
Hmm.
yes, I'm tired of your bullshit, but I'm gonna come back anyway. And like, what does that I'm gonna come back anyway? That might be a totally different billable hour of set of questions. But am I
Yeah.
tired of it? Possibly. Am I tired of a
Hmm.
specific person looking at you, MCU? Maybe, maybe not. That's very
Yeah.
subjective. But final
Right.
thoughts.
My final thoughts are that it is not abusive for an artist to keep on creating,
No.
even though their last project was not well liked. I think that they should continue.
Cobb, final thoughts.
I I agree with that and I want to say
Maybe
for the
I got
record
final
that
thoughts wrong. My bad.
no, I agree, I love that. I love that final thought and I want to
Hmm.
my final thought is that I agree with that statement that like the people that absorb the content should not be the reason why you choose not to make content or choose not to make art rather. Though I do not think that that's what's happening. I think that it is perfectly okay and normal
Hmm.
to have relationships with media that are problematic, yet you still engage with it with the hope that it will be better or the comfort that I see my favorite character still existing and still alive in this space, even if it's not the greatest space or even if it's not the most entertaining space. I think that that's completely normal.
Hmm.
But I think we also have to admit to ourselves that maybe we're being exploited. And also like as Americans and as human beings we love violence, which is why action films are the ones that tend to succeed the most because we have an inherent obsession with violence, and action films do highlight and take hold of and embrace violence, especially if it's done in the name of good. So I think that that's why action films are as popular and will always be popular because human beings are obsessed with violence, especially if we feel like it's warranted. So that's why action films, which superhero films are nothing but action films, will always be popular because as human beings
For
we
sure.
love violence, especially if we know it's okay to be violent. So
And on that note, Barflies, we want to hear from you. What do you think about
Did you have a
superhero
final thought?
fatigue?
no, we don't.
Wait, why would you say that to the Barflies?
I'm fatigued with y'all thoughts about the fatigue.
Don't mind Cobb.
Hawk,
She
did you have a final thought?
Yeah,
uh
what's your final thought?
um is there superhero fatigue? Uh not officially, but what is it? Pervasively over the span of all that is superhero, I would say no. I think
Mm-hmm.
that there can be a what is it? I'm tired of the quality that I'm getting. Or
Right.
maybe I just want something a bit different, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a certain aesthetic that the MCU has grown to have that maybe I'm tired
Mm-hmm.
of that. So like when I see the Batman, I'm like, oh, this is a great breath of fresh air. Superheroes, no, I don't think that there is a fatigue of superheroes per se. And on that note, barflies, I hope you engage with us. Tell us about your superhero fatigue if you have some, and if you don't, and why
Mm-hmm.
or why not. Uh, as we always like to say here in, I was about to say in memory of, he's not dead, but in lieu of,
He's alive.
right,
He's
yeah,
fine.
in lieu of Big Dan not being
Dan is
here,
alive.
right, he's alive and
Mm-hmm.
well. Y'all have a blessed night.